Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Awaken Together podcast. I am Jen, and we don't have Kat today, but I have a very special guest that I want to introduce. We are going to cover the topics of neurodivergencies and sensory needs, which encompasses all kinds of stuff. So we're going to talk it out with you. So welcome, my good friend, Haleigh.
Hi, everyone. Excited to be here.
Hi. Yeah, we're so happy to have you. Me and Haleigh met on a random bachelorette party trip and connected right away. She,
Mhm.
she is an occupational therapist, so she's in the rehab world with me. And yeah, we connected right away. And since then have had so many breakdowns of conversations on sensory needs in general, what that looks like. I think we can nerd out on this subject forever.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite topics.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit first of what your job entails, and then I can kind of share my personal experience with the term even neurodivergencies and what sensory needs actually even means.
Yeah. As you said, I'm an occupational therapist, but I work in the realm of children. Under OT, that scope, we get to do sensory integration. And we work with a lot of kids on autism spectrum, Down syndrome, just kind of all over the board with diagnoses specifically. Yeah, like you'll kind of see an OT swinging kids around on different spandex equipment or swings or gonna like slides. There's just the equipment is what usually people like think of first when they think of OT, I feel like. So yeah, it's all of that good stuff.
Very cool. Yeah. Do you guys actually use the term neurodivergencies? Do you hear that in your professional world or more just outside of it?
So we use that and we'll say like neurotypical and like neurodivergent. Yeah, we'll use both of those. Mhm.
Okay. And so neurodivergencies, if you've never heard that term and you're listening, the everything, it kind of encompasses like the full spectrum, which can include ADHD, sensory processing disorders, dyslexia, autism, Asperger's, OCD, all of
Mhm.
that, correct?
Oh yeah, all of that good stuff. It kind of is like the umbrella term.
Yeah. And so I had not even heard the word neurodivergencies. I personally was diagnosed with ADHD like very young. I think they told my mom that around age 5, but she didn't really believe in treatment stuff. I got
Mhm.
no help with it growing up. So I went
Mhm.
through school like I was known as the problem child that just like wouldn't sit still, like constantly like sit down, Jennifer, stop talking, always getting
Mhm.
in trouble for my behavior. My mom was a little bit, she liked my uniqueness, and I think she did stand by me with that side pretty well. So she would just be like, that's how she is. So she kind of
Mhm.
embraced it as being who I am, not
Mhm.
really a mental kind of disorder that maybe I could get some like outside help to assist with. She was just like, Jennifer's just quirky, you know? that's that's how it got written off. But as I got older, I got treatment for it in college. I could not believe when I was first like medicated for it, like the night and day
Mhm.
difference. And I was like, if my brain is supposed to work like this, the difference between the two is like profound. And I
Yeah.
was shocked by that. And then I read, I think the big turning page where I got like even deeper into this was the book, The Divergent Mind, where I
Mhm.
really got to read kind of the newer studies on what has been done, especially in women in the neurodivergent field, which is still
Mhm.
relatively newer, and just hearing all the different details, what that looks like, and how much it actually was playing out in my day to day life in ways I didn't realize.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, girls and boys present in completely different ways, especially with like autism. That's, kind of who I see the most. They are presented so differently that boys are a little bit easier to diagnose, and you can diagnose them sooner, as early as like 3 years old. but girls can go a lot longer. Just kind of like we use the term masking. You can mask like your different, I get people will say their quirks or their sensory needs. And there's like adult women our age that probably have some sort of level of autism, but will never have never been diagnosed. And I think the schools are doing a lot better these days of, giving kids IEPs to like allow them to have like a fidget in class or like some extra movement breaks, or to have helped some of those kids like you that were like the quote unquote problem child when they just really needed some like additional sensory supports. So luckily they are making strides in that. But
That is good to
yeah.
hear. Can you explain masking a little bit more? Because that was definitely a term that I had not heard and didn't really
Mhm.
realize until I read that book, which you've also read. You said they made you read it in school, which I freaking love
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit more about masking and also how masking, do you see that? I guess you don't see it as much in children because
Yeah.
they aren't hiding anything, but I'm sure you see it in the parents' probably
Oh.
behavior too.
Hmm. Yeah. And so the children I see haven't learned how to mask yet. So that's why they're obviously already at therapy. They've been referred to because, they're already exhibiting these behaviors. But as far as like adults go, are kind of all masking our like sensory needs in a way. Like now your preferences of like how much you can tolerate, like certain textured clothings that might like irritate you. Or I think the most common thing people will think of with masking is like your facial expression. Like when you're in a group of people socializing, you kind of naturally have this like happier looking face. You're like want people to like conversate with you and appear like you're happy, but sometimes neurodivergent minds don't see the need. They feel like that's kind of trivial. Like, why does my facial expression have to match like what I'm talking about? So they mask and, you know, they'll kind of take off their mask later. And it's more of just like you can see your facial expression just kind of go blank, is usually how they present when they're not masking. It's kind of just like the way they present themselves to like in front of other people, basically.
Yeah. And
Um,
that was, I think I really started like learning that term from TikTok and being on neurodivergent TikTok and getting to
yeah.
see all the videos. I really kind of connected that for myself. There's so
Mhm,
many things that I think because I didn't get like a proper treatment that I just naturally
mhm,
started learning that, oh, people respond better when I'm
mhm.
not moving so much. And
Yeah.
I just did all these things to make people comfortable, which you hear people talk about
Mhm.
chronic people pleasing. It could
Yeah.
actually be that you've just kind of learned that when you act out in the way that feels more natural to you, it kind of disturbs the person in front of you. Like I notice if I'm tapping like as much as probably I'm like wanting to or wanting to like rock more or fidget, like it
Mhm.
really does like rub a lot of people wrong if I'm like all over the place. So I think I naturally learned like let me hold a little bit more still, let me make better eye contact and just
Mhm.
these little things. But I think what was profound for me to learn, and I went on kind of a deep dive in addition to that Divergent Mind book, but masking really causes long-term effects. And we hear the
Mhm.
term burnout and exhaustion, like just chronic fatigue. And a lot of that can be because it is so much to not honor those like normal ticks and stems and just the things your body naturally needs to kind of output energy. It's
Oh, yeah.
really hard on you. And so I'm sure in your profession, Haleigh, finding a balance between the kids being able to kind of exist in the world we've created, but also honor some of their own quirks. There's like a balance there because you can't teach kids to fully not play the game we've created, but at the same
Mhm.
time, you don't want them having to blend in so much that, yeah, they're having to repress kind of all of their natural instincts.
Yeah. And I mean, it's mentally exhausting. For them, I'm sure, like you're constantly having to be on, and they're not really giving their brain like a break.
Yeah.
So it would be, I think, just the more we talk about it and have people know, like, okay, Jen's over here, like tapping away at the table, just let her do her thing. Like, she just
Mhm.
needs that input right now. And like, that's okay. And then, but for the other person, like that tapping noise might be like an auditory defensiveness thing for them. And so then that's also a sensory thing going on. So, and I just really feel like every person, whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent, has some sort of sensory defensiveness or something going on. Like, I personally feel like I have a bit of like auditory defensiveness. Like, I just hate some certain noises. I know that about myself, and I know like how much of that input I could like tolerate before I get tempered or start to get overstimulated, which we'll talk about. Yeah, you kind of have to, the first step is definitely identifying what your sensory quirks are.
Yeah, and I wanna build off of that, exactly what you said. It's not I don't think it's that necessarily it was, like, unpleasing necessarily for the other person to see me, like,
Mhm,
rocking and moving, but I could be
mhm,
triggering overstimulation for another person, and it's so
mhm,
interesting because I think a lot of the things that we write off as people's personalities really
mhm,
underlying all of that is probably some form of a sensory issue or a
mhm.
neurodivergency, and the problem is, though, when we don't learn proper communication to explain it, it can come off so personal, and I think that's where the masking starts happening because you don't wanna get hurt.
Mhm.
There's, like, a emotional connection to that. So learning to communicate, like, I don't want you to feel bad, like, do what you gotta do, but that's just, like, kind of a lot for me, so I just need a second, or, like, just saying that you
Mhm.
need space, but making it more about you instead of, "Can you stop moving?" or, "Can you stop making that noise?" or
Yeah.
these little lines that I know a lot of parents that probably never got diagnosed that are, like, on the brink of overstimulation probably
Yeah.
snap at their kids a lot for these little things, but there's really a real need to learn how to communicate it and make it about advertising your own needs instead of
Mhm.
blaming the other person for what they're naturally doing. One of those things is when I get very excited with my ADHD, I talk faster and louder. And the one wound for me is like, Jen, please, like quieter, like stop. And so then all of a
No.
sudden I just won't want to talk. I'll be like, oh crap. Like yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. I was on like volume like 100. I hear what you mean. And so I think a way that would make me feel less hurt with that, that would also be addressing is someone saying, hey, Jen, real quick, I'm like super sensitive to sound and I don't know, like there's just a lot of noise going on in the background and the volume, like it's all just making me nervous. Like, can I just have like a 2-second pause or like just sharing something like that? And then I'll hear you without making it feel like such a personal attack. There's a
Yeah.
way that we can find like a balance between those things.
Mhm. And it's tough too if people don't know, if you don't know what your sensory quirks are, like if they're not able to communicate that or haven't even realized, hey, I'm feeling this way and kind of aggravated because of, that volume or something like if they can't make that connection, then they're probably gonna be like, I don't like her because, she had a bad um I'm gonna try to like
She
I
like
didn't feel good
triggers.
around that person at
Yeah,
that
she
moment.
triggers me.
Yeah, because she's triggering for me, but they might
Uh-huh.
not know why. And so that's also tough if they've never been educated in that either. They've never heard of their sensory stuff, then
Yeah, that's why this
the learning
conversation
curve.
is, yeah, super important. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. And we can also go into like what overstimulation and like what understimulation looks like. But you want to
Mhm.
think of it kind of in terms of the senses, right? Like some people take in way more visual input, some people take in more audio input, some people are very tactile sensitive, so sensitive to textures. Some people see this as they eat, just in textures with food. Yeah. Can you just go over a little bit more of what each of the senses and what that looks like, and maybe even how you guys do kind of evaluations on that?
Yeah. So, like, the first place to start is everybody kind of thinks that there's five senses when there's actually eight of them. And so we'll go into these. We'll start with like tactile. So, your touch. That is good. I see it more of like kids who have aversion to like tags in their clothes, or light touch is can be very like aversive for some of the children that I see. Then we have your sense of smell. We don't see that. That is a really tough one to try to work on. If some kids do have a really strong sense of smell and can, are more susceptible to like gagging from random smells, usually it's around food related. That is like the toughest one to try to like treat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so we have our smell, we have our sight. Some kids are very visually overstimulated. So you kind of try to like neutralize like their workspace, or they might have one eye is stronger than the other one. So you try to do different activities to strengthen like their ocular motor skills. And then we'll have our taste. Obviously, we work on feeding a lot in OT and we try to do it sensory based feeding. So we try to start with, can the child touch the food? Can they now smell the food? Can they now like kiss it, lick it? And then we try to take bites. And it's usually a very slow process to get through all
Yeah.
the steps. But we find that we do see a lot more success when you could break it up into like those, each of those sensory areas with food. So then we have our auditory. So, like I said, I kind of have some auditory defensiveness, but some of these kids are the sound of the toilet is terrifying to them, or like the hand dryer in the bathroom. Sirens are a big one, the vacuum, so all of these different sounds, sometimes they will just go into like a panic mode. It's kind of like the fight, flight, or freeze. That's exactly what they're feeling. They think, we're being attacked, basically.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
vacuum's coming to get us. So we work on those sort of things. So those are all five senses that we all kind of know, grew up learning. So the other three are vestibular, proprioceptive, and interoception. The vestibular it's within our ear. It has to do with like the crystals within inside your ear canal, and it shows you where your body is in space. Basically, it's kind of the way of telling your brain, hey, I'm not floating around in the sky, like I'm standing on the ground. So we'll provide vestibular input through the use of swings or scooter boards, or doing yoga is a great way.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that can like invert the plane that you're in, head upside down, rolling, anything like that counts as vestibular. So some of the kids that I see, they probably do feel like their body is floating around in space. They're just not within their body at all. And then we have proprioceptive input, which is kind of any kind of input into your muscles and your joints. So think of like heavy work, kind of workout at the gym with weights, anything weight bearing, stuff like that. So and it also gives you the idea of how much pressure that you need to use for like pressure grading. So like I know if I go push that door, how much pressure muscles I'm going to have to use to like get it open without it flinging across to like breaking the glass
Mm-hmm.
or something. So that's proprioceptive input. And then interoception is all of the feeling you have inside your body. So, like, I can tell when I have stomach ache, I can tell when I need to use the bathroom. So, that was also a tough one. Usually see problems with that when, like, toileting, like potty training comes up, or and they're having a really hard time with that, then they'll come to OT. So,
Love
yeah,
it.
that's
Yeah,
all
that's
of them.
so insightful. It's so insightful, and it's so important that with all of those sensory needs, the fact that we're starting to address them more in kids and seeing it as significant as it is. My husband's also a behavioral therapist and works with a lot of the behaviors that are coming up from what Haleigh's working on in OT, from their sensory needs not being met, and then
Mhm.
it looking like really bad behavior, when in reality it's one of these things just not being addressed or not being received by the mind and body connection enough or properly. And I think so many adults are walking around having had these maybe limitations in one of those categories, or receiving too much information in one of those categories. And then they're trying to move through life and they just are coming off like they are very easily angry and frustrated. And I just all once you learn about sensory needs, almost every behavior, I'm just like I link it to sensory stuff. Like, so I think it's so much of what we're actually dealing with and seeing within people. To go on some of the ones you spoke of with I have ADHD and dyslexia, and I definitely have a lot of sensory issues, but who knows, like if I'm going to fall on the spectrum even deeper, if I go on more of a deep dive into that direction. But as a child, I remember also like I would spin for hours a day, and I loved to spin, like constantly on a chair, constantly just spinning in the middle of the living room and doing flips. Like I did flips all the time, not realizing that I was just trying to like bring some sensation to my body. And I just had this natural instinct of doing that. And I also never wanted to have clothes on. Like I hated touch sensation on me. I could not stand it. And I think one of the interesting things, which I've worked on a lot more as an adult, but as a kid, I never felt like I stopped feeling my clothes. Like when they were on me, I felt them the entire time. Like I have a shirt on and I know I have a shirt on all day, the entire day. So the whole day I'm taking inventory of my shirt, all the sounds around me, probably more sound input than the average person. I'm very sensitive to overhead lighting, and I'm just like taking in like triple the amount of information in my environment. And that was coming off as me being a behavior problem child. And as an adult, I think I came off, I think I tried to start numbing a lot of it, like high masking. And then, I would drink and just things to calm me down, but not doing any of probably what the sensory needs I actually needed to do were. So what do you think this looks like in, some of these sensory inputs? Do you see kind of the transfer into adulthood, or have you learned some of the like crossover on those things?
Yeah, I mean, so we try to give them just different skills to be able to like address those needs. Like it sounds like you were seeking a lot of input through, because you're trying to do is sit there in class and listen, but like how are you supposed to do that if your brain is only thinking about your shirt on or the lights above you? Like that's a lot to do to try to focus. Also the spinning, I hate spinning. It's like
opposite. Yeah.
yeah, kids, a lot of kids, they like you said, they want to feel something, they want to feel like their body. So spinning is a really easy way of getting that input right away, but there's actually a lot of negative effects that come from spinning. Around 45 minutes to an hour after a lot of spinning, you get a lot of more behaviors come out. You can get extra nauseous. It really messes like your whole nervous system up, spinning in general. So those spinning kids, if you give them proprioceptive input, it combats that. It's like the opposite. So you got to try to give them a lot of input into their body through like deep pressure, or animal walks, or anything to just get them back into their body. It's going to try to prevent them from feeling those like adverse effects later on in the day.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to teach these kids like that you can do this after you spin if you really feel like you need to spin, and hopefully that'll translate over into like adulthood if they still feel like they need these certain inputs. Just trying to give them as many skills as possible and make them as like independent and successful as they can be.
Yeah, so good. And I think I slowly started learning, deep pressure 100% was the answer that I would probably have been so good for me for my parents to kind of know about it's so funny because my parents, they did not ever see me as having like a mental health issue. It was really Jen is just quirky, as I said, but my dad has even said, he's like, when you were a baby, you would cry all the time. The only thing that would calm you down is if we squeezed you like really tight. And like, that is the most obvious, like obvious sensory issues. But there wasn't even that much therapy for that at that time. I don't think it could have gone a lot different. But as I got older, I was constantly putting weight on myself. I felt so much better when I would press into my body, when I obviously love like weighted blankets. And those are the things that I know like help guide me back into sensations. And talking to the link into spirituality, which Haley's also deep into that with me. It's just really cool because yeah, a lot of the things in yoga and stuff that I was doing to, yeah, just work on breath work and body were
Mhm.
really great resources for so many of my sensory needs as well.
Yeah, definitely. I love deep pressure. I sometimes at the end of the day I feel like overstimulated from work and I have a long drive, so I really like have to do a bunch of stuff when I get home to just start relaxing. And sometimes I just have my partner lay his entire body on top of me and I'm just like,
Yes.
let's just sit here for a minute because I just need that input, and it really calms me. But we do like weighted vests on little kids, body socks. I think I sent you a body sock
Yeah,
link.
I love it.
They're
I
they're so
love it.
fun, but they're great for input. But yeah, I
Haley,
mean,
do you look at people as being sometimes more prone to being overstimulated versus understimulated, or is this a spectrum that is ever changing? Because over is having like way too much input, and understimulated is having way too little. Is there some people that are more starting off with one extreme, or is this just like a constant up and down swing when you have one of these neurodivergencies?
yeah, that's a good question. Like, I think it's all over the board for
Yeah.
sure, but I think in my job, I'm definitely seeing more of the overstimulation just because it's impacting like their day to day. So then that's when they're referred to therapy.
Yeah.
Um, but like the understimulated is gonna appear as more like a really laid back, chill kind of kid. Might be kind of like lazy or not really seeking that much stimulation. They're not usually going to be like categorized as like a behavior kid or anything, but I think that there's still some needs there that could be met. They could tolerate some like extra input, but it's not really going to come across as like a big need as much as what the overstimulation is going to cause.
Yeah.
You're going to see a lot of tantrums and meltdowns and stuff like that. So, which is obviously more concerning for parents and teachers. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't fit our world very easily. So,
no.
yeah. So, some of the things that I learned from that Divergent Mind book that I just want to share on here that was just wild to me. She really talks about in the book about how our environment and the world we've created is really so opposite of the design that would really accommodate the neurodivergencies, which I think she said in the book, it's about 35% of the population. So it we should have more of a world catered for this. But
Mhm.
she talked about how the infrastructure of even buildings, like with tile floors, that obviously you hear like the click clacking of your shoes and just the
Mhm.
walls kind of not absorbing a whole lot of the sound and a lot of that reverb and bouncing, and just the fluorescent lights that are in most
Mhm.
stores that we go into and in our schools. It's kind of a nightmare for a sensory need kid to go into. And then especially as an adult, when we're just in this constant bombarding of sensory input, and then we're
Mhm.
wondering why we're like so burned out and so tired and like have trouble being productive beyond our job, when this entire, if we had buildings that were designed to absorb more of those sounds, lower lighting, maybe not the radio blasting and echoing off the tile floors everywhere you freaking go, and
Yeah.
we were accommodated to this, maybe the overall energy we had at the end of the day when we get off of work to do other things could be vastly different if our needs were more
Mhm.
met in kind of the outside world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very overwhelming for a lot of people, not just kids, but yeah, I definitely think there's something there. And just the idea of like expectation to have to sit at a desk for 8 hours like straight, like who like that's insane. Like, and to
Is
ask a
insane.
child to have to sit at a desk and like actively pay attention to a lesson for hours on end. Like it's just um whatever, for whatever reason, like that's the society standard and it's not
Wild.
great for everyone, of
It's
course.
wild. It's not great for majority. I feel like
Yeah.
it's a lot. And
No.
I think you see kids responding to the sensory up and downs more kind of in the moment, but I think it's also important to know in your adult years that it doesn't always hit you necessarily right in the moment. Some of the
Mhm.
times I had a very like overstimulated day, like if I do a grocery store day, I usually really feel that like hours later and I just feel like kind of zapped. Like I do think there's sometimes a little bit of a delay. So I think when you start thinking in terms of sensory as you move through the world, like knowing what you do, like maybe you love to go to social events, but then the payoff of doing some of those things more often is kind of like, yeah, you have like a 2 week period where I don't know, I just don't feel right. It's really
Mhm.
important to look at how much you're doing, when you're doing it, and maybe what the payoff energetically is later, because you want to find a balance. The burnout is so real. And if you're going into social situations where, yeah, you're saying hi to everyone, kind of over happy, there's music, there's all this stuff, but then, yeah, for weeks, you don't feel right. Maybe you've never even thought of linking past event
Mhm.
to what you're currently experiencing. But when you start thinking in terms of sensory, those bridges between things, I think, get a little bit more insightful and clear. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah, I think that that is exactly right. Like we invited to a lot of weddings and weddings are such big events and you're meeting most of the people you might not know. So you're just
Mhm.
constantly having these like quick conversations with basically a stranger. And there's usually loud music and a lot of movement and a lot of new foods, and you usually have to travel. And so it's a lot of stimulation there. And if you don't come home and know how to regulate your nervous system back to your natural state, then you're going to keep feeling the effects a lot longer
Yeah.
than you would have if you hadn't gone to the wedding or
Yeah.
wherever.
Uh-huh. And yeah, it's a balance. I think knowing your neurodivergencies and the fact that, yeah, you're gonna have to build boundaries on along what you can take and manage is so, so freaking important. And
Mhm.
let's talk about let's talk about like options for sensory regulation. So I'll share a couple of mine and you can add like fidget toys are literally amazing. I wish like so bad that this would have been more of a thing in our like elementary and middle school years. Like
Mhm.
the little fidget spinners that got popular. I have this little mesh thing that has a marble in it that you can roll around. I
Oh, yeah,
freaking
I like those.
love
Mhm.
that. But yeah, fidget toys are just giving your mind like kind of a constant where you can play with something. And that usually helps me to take in less of my environment. So when I'm fidgeting more,
Mhm.
I can focus more on what is happening in front of me than taking in absolutely everything, which is what happens when I don't like find some kind of consistency. I think
Mhm.
without fidget toys, I usually like am rubbing my legs a lot. I notice I do that all the time, like kind of
Mhm.
self-soothing, like it's okay. And I use noise canceling headphones a
Mhm.
lot. Like when I'm going around the house, it just turns the volume down on everything. And then yeah, I can play music just in my headphones if I want. I play with 8D music a lot, which kind of circles the
Mhm.
audio around you, which is really good for kind of using both lobes of the brain working, kind of giving you, yeah, just a auditory, consistent, more sensory activity. And yeah, I obviously do regular kind of shaking and yoga just to like yeah, get into my body more. But those like two couple little things and trying to tell myself that I need to mask a lot less and just let quirky Jen out again because she is still here. She hasn't gone anywhere, and learning that I can communicate my needs. Like, sorry if I'm moving a lot. Like, I'm just kind of like, I've dealt with a lot. And you don't want to end up having a panic attack because you're repressing
Mhm.
this stuff down. You need to just find a way that you can ebb and flow with what works for you. And then, yeah, letting other people communicate what their needs are And if they are taking it personal, maybe have a conversation like, listen, okay, I fall on a spectrum disorder and I need to be able to live my life in accordance to that. And so, yeah, we might need to talk this out and see what's going to work, or take larger breaks when we're together. Maybe you both go cool out for a second in the middle of hanging out. Does that seem weird socially? Yeah. But these are the kind of conversations we need to have so that we stop the repression and masking. Anyway, side rant. Haleigh, tell me some of the other sensory management tools that you use.
Yeah, so fidgets are super great. I get to play with them all the time. It's great. Like literally right now as we're speaking, I'm just
Same.
bending the crap out of a paperclip.
I
Like,
have my fidget toy too.
yeah, like it's just something that your body can do while your mind is like trying to stay on track. Like it's just so we can use the kids are allowed to use them in class a lot of the times if they're on their IEP. Or we typically will like tie some TheraBand to the bottom of their chair legs so they can like bounce their feet on it.
Love that.
Yeah, yeah, those are fun. Or there's like adaptive seating where you could do like like a wobble seat, or just something where you can just kind of move slightly, but you're not being overly distracted to the others around you. Definitely, vibration is fun to play with too if you are with kids and with like for adults. You want to try to self regulate your nervous system like before you get to the point of overstimulation, of course. So there's definitely different things that you're going to use to help you like stay focused versus this is something else you're going to do when you're overstimulated,
Mm-hmm.
because you're a little bit too far past the
Yeah.
point. So there are different areas of that you're gonna have to like figure out. So like fidgets, you're not a fidget is not gonna help you if you're having a panic attack. And it's like it's just
Uh-huh.
a different level. But yeah, so like the deep breathe, I teach a lot of deep breathing and animal walks and basically like yoga for kids. Deep pressure works well went for over certain kids when they're overstimulated. Flexion just in general is just soothing. Let's
Like
see.
going into like a fetal position, and and pressing
Exactly.
like against the wall, like things like that where
Mhm.
you're getting that input. We teach that to a lot of like my stroke patients that are coming back,
Mhm.
like any pressing just to get some joint activation. So you have so many
Mhm.
receptors around all of your joints that give feedback that I'm in my body, I belong here. Little things like that. And it also reemphasizes that the relationship to exercise, if it is kind of been eschewed by our stupid diet culture, that movement in the body and finding the movement practice that works for you is doing so much more than working on your physical form. It's a really good way of
Mhm.
regulating, and it leads to more breath focus. Movement practices are very, very essential. And finding
Mhm.
what works. If something is not working for you, really pay attention to that, because there's so many things to trial and error. And this conversation could go on for hours because it's so vast. But yeah, if you're working with, if you have children and you know that they have sensory needs, occupational therapy is an awesome option to explore sensory input.
Mhm.
And yeah, if you're an adult struggling with this stuff, like it's a really good journey just to play and learn what your neurodivergencies are. Even if you get a diagnosis for one of these neurodivergencies, that doesn't still always give you your answer for your sensory problems. Like it's still going to be a game of kind of figuring it out
Mhm.
because everyone's is so different.
Yeah, it's so much of trial and error, and what works for one person is most likely not going to work for the next.
Yeah.
Um, and so my job is kind of like detective work and just trying something new all the time. And whatever's going to like hit, then just you could stick with that because they're usually not going to become oversaturated by it. Like once you figure out you like this fidget, usually you're going to stick with it. I've seen, but um yeah, it's really just playing around with it and seeing like what you need. And even if like sometimes isolation is all you need, if you get overstimulated by just people being around people in general, being by yourself is also a sensory like
Yeah.
tool. Just to take a break, yeah, take a moment and then come back or whatever.
It's
A lot
so
of
linked to mindfulness. It's so linked to
exactly. I know. It's
yes.
great. Some
Yeah.
people will even just like cover their eye, like you keep your eyes open, but you put your palms like over your eye sockets. So you
Yeah.
just get rid of the visual overstimulation, or same thing with hearing, like your noise canceling headphones. Like you just need a break. Um,
Yeah, and telling
mhm,
people like, I'm gonna close that. Yeah, you're out and you're saying, I'm gonna close my eyes for just a second because I can tell I'm taking in a lot. Like, these are
mhm,
just the little advertisements. We got to get better. This conversation is so important, and the world so deeply at least needs to have the seed of this planted in their minds, because viewing the
mhm,
world under this perspective of, yeah, neurodivergencies and sensory needs is an essential part of moving through life with more intention, taking less things personal. I think this is
mhm.
definitely a very applicable part of the spiritual journey. Haleigh, I know you're also on this like a very spiritual path, but this stuff is
Mhm.
important because it gets in the way of your nervous system being dysregulated. And when your nervous system is dysregulated, it's hard to listen into your intuition, to do any of the, to even
Mhm.
know where you start and these sensory things begin. It becomes all very blurred, and it can make you very reactive. It can also make you hurt people around you when in reality the connection is so deeply important for us on this path, and we need each other. So learning this stuff is very, very vital.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think when we were in school, like it just wasn't known about yet. It just like wasn't, the information just wasn't out there as much. And now these days, I feel like you can hear at least a little bit more of it. So I think we're slowly getting there.
Yeah. Well, I really, really appreciate your insight. This stuff is so fun to talk out. Thank you for coming on and sharing
Yeah,
some of your thoughts.
of course. Anytime. I love it. I listen to all the episodes, so it's like
Aw.
I'm here for it.
I love it, Haleigh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you all for listening. We will see you next week. Bye.